I'm going to do this. Let's see what this is like with a microphone stand. Kind of feel like I'm stand-up, kind of a stand-up comedian vibe right now. Looking around, seeing who I can make fun of in the audience. No, none of that. All right, so yeah, here we are again. We had last week off. We're back now. I think all the rest of the weeks are booked in July, but August is wide open. So what an accomplishment. I know. Thanks for the lax applause. There, it's a sad amount of applause. Just let it hang there for a minute. Let it hang. We'll let it hang there. Just the silence. No, give yourself a round of applause for making it here to Chadev today. There, now the room's warmer. Now it's warmer. Yeah, thank you. So, any community announcements? Anybody have any events going on that they want to give a shout out to? Anybody? Come up now. Huh? Hack Night, Carbon 5 Hack Nights. Next week, Wednesday, isn't it? Wednesday. So come out to that. Those are always fun. And even if you don't have fun at it, you still get to eat some pizza, some nice pizza, right? And maybe even drink some water. You can stay hydrated. It's nice for everybody. You have one? Come on up. Yeah. Okay, sure. Well, wait. We got to get the mic first.
Oh, sorry. This man just said stay hydrated. It is record-breakingly hot outside, literally. So there's people who are waking up outside who don't have immediate access to water, and that just that really breaks my heart. So I brought some people together to raise some funds to produce like these cool little bottles to distribute. We have 100 of them, and we're going to be doing an outreach for the community starting next Tuesday on the 17th. And so for a month, every Tuesday and Saturday, we'll be going out to areas where people are in dire need of like just hydration, which we so take for granted, right? I mean, it's still Chattanooga, but there's still people in need. Initiative is called Stay Hydrated. Ironically, you can hold that. But yeah, we got some aluminum bottles rather than just handing out plastic bottles. I want that to be like a source of relief and encouragement for people, just like something to uplift their spirits. And we'll mostly be focused on like building relationships because, you know, meeting physiological needs is just like the foundation for a longer term impact. So if you guys are free, check out modernhippie.us on any social media and you can stay up to date with the initiative. And I hope to see some of your faces there and build relationships with you guys. So thank you.
That's like one of the more worthwhile community announcements we've had in a while. Not to denigrate other people's endeavors, but that's a nice thing. Modern Hippie, that's Hippie. Modern Hippie on your social media platform of choice. Anybody else? I have one. So I'm helping organize a really great conference, and I am biased. But it's going to be a really great one. We've got a really great lineup. It's called Gig City Elixir. If you've not heard of it, you can go to gigcityelixir.com. You can see the full speaker lineup. It's a 2-day single-track conference, single-track-ish. There may be some different stuff going on kind of on the side. But we got great people like John Hughes, which is one of the designers of Haskell, and Dave Thomas of American Discovery Ruby fame and stuff like that. So, and a whole lot of other great folks as well. So it's going to be a fun time. It's not just for Elixir enthusiasts. We also have all sorts of other folks from around the community, the functional programming community. And so there's going to be a lot of sessions for folks that maybe only work in object-oriented in their day-to-day job. It's also great because you can take some of the principles and patterns that you'll learn at this conference and apply it in your work in OO world. And that's nice. That's a nice thing. So without further ado, we've got Alex here, Alex from TVA. And he's going to tell us a little bit about why what we think about DevOps might not be the right thing. So give it a round of applause for Alex.
No? Check. All right, there we go. All right, thanks. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me here, Chaw Dev. I am Alex Herwire. I'll talk a little bit more about myself in a little bit. But so what are we? Why am I here today? Today I'm here to give you my definition of DevOps. I started putting together the presentation for this, and I realized that just giving you my definition of DevOps would have been a really short presentation. So I am also going to be giving you TVA's implementation of DevOps and where we're at today. So without any further ado, I'm going to give you a little intro about me. I've lived in Chattanooga since the 80s. I wasn't born here, but I've been here most of my life. I have a wife and 2 kids. That's us at Mr. T's down in St. Oma. I actually grew up in St. Oma, so. And I've worked in IT for about 14 years. It depends, about 14 years, because it depends if you count the times that I was washing dishes but doing like side gigs as an IT person. I started out in help desk. I moved into a help desk manager role. I started doing more infrastructure management at an accounting firm, and I helped them roll out their first virtualization platform. That turned into more of a career in VMware at that point. So I actually started at TVA, working their virtual infrastructure, helping them mature their virtual infrastructure. And a few years ago, we decided to start looking at cloud more seriously. So they asked me to be a tech lead for our cloud implementation or cloud maturity. Recently, they've asked me to help us to move the bar with our DevOps implementation. So that's a little bit about me. I come from a technical background. I've recently moved into a senior program manager role, so take that for what it is. And we call it DevSecOps at TVA because we have security baked in as well. When I say DevSecOps or DevOps, I really mean the same thing. All right, so the big question right now is what's DevOps? So there's not actually a governing body that defines what DevOps is. So when you look at things like Scaled Agile Framework or ITIL, those sorts of things, they always have, they have some sort of either for-profit or non-profit behind them that's defining what the actual standards are. So when you look at DevOps, there's not actually anything that defines what DevOps is, and that's actually by design by the makers of this. So back in around 2009, some people got together and they started using this terminology. They had a DevOps days back then, and it's purposefully mushy, if you will. So when we started looking at DevOps from an organization like at TVA a couple years ago, we started like asking, okay, so what is DevOps? And there was a lot of discussion about that. So there's a few definitions that I've come across that have helped me kind of focus in on what DevOps is. So I'm going to share a few of those for you right now. Gartner has this wall of text where they define what DevOps is. It's really long. I'm not going to read it to you, but there are some keywords in there that I've made bold in there. So you have culture, you have rapid delivery, agile and lean is in there. You're talking about people and culture, that's in there. Collaboration, so you're actually working with other people and not just throwing things over the wall. And automation, you'll see automation a lot with DevOps. That's Gartner's definition. If you're not familiar with what Gartner is, they're a large, they do consulting work for consulting and research for IT. So they're pretty well respected in IT and in larger organizations. Normally you see either you're working with Forrester or IDC or Gartner. There's also the Booz Allen, so this is a much shorter definition, but again, you'll see the same general bolded things there where you're talking about culture and process and automating. They mention here end-to-end flow. That's something that you'll see a common theme with DevOps. So when they were coming up with DevOps, they actually were really influenced by the book The Goal. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. The Goal is a book written about Toyota's manufacturing process in the 70s and 80s. Toyota, and if you're familiar with Lean, Six Sigma, or anything like that, that's also based off of Toyota's practices from the 70s and 80s. So the DevOps literature is really based around that idea of thinking the entire system in single piece flow. So how long does it take to actually get a single piece of work through the entire system. And also, it's talking in this one about delivering. So Booz Allen, again, they're a consulting firm. They do IT consulting. So Scale to Agile framework. This is another body. So at TVA, we use Scale to Agile framework, or bits and pieces of it at least. And here, they use the term mindset. Yeah, it's not a thing. It's a mindset. It's like, how do you feel? How do you think? There's culture, technical practices, communication. So people actually talking to each other, which is really important if you want to have a successful DevOps transformation. Automation, again, is mentioned here. Cooperation between people. There's also testing, deploying, and releasing. They also mentioned maintaining the solution. So safe, I'll get into in a minute. They have a little bit of a twist on what DevOps is. All right, this is the last one that I'm putting up here. So Gene Kim, if anybody's familiar with Gene Kim, he helped write the Phoenix Project. He was one of the co-authors for the DevOps Handbook. He is the one that organized the very first and continues to organize all of the DevOps Enterprise Summits. He's kind of the guy, if you're looking for what is DevOps, he's one of the main people that you're going to talk to or think about. And he defines it in the 3 ways. So this is based off of that book that I was talking about, The Goal, about Toyota. And Gene is an architect from his previous life, and you can tell by how he thinks about things, because he thinks about big systems, the entire system. So there's the first way. So thinking about things as far as the entire system. So you're not optimizing just for your stuff. Sometimes when you optimize only for your thing, you actually make the entire system work worse. So that's something that's a little bit counterintuitive, especially when you're working in larger organizations. You generally you want to make things as quick and streamlined for yourself as possible, but by doing that, sometimes you actually make things worse for everybody else. So that's the first way. Second way is the feedback loops. We probably have a lot of Agile enthusiasts in here. Agile talks about feedback loops too. You're constantly talking and readjusting as you're going forward. It's really important. And then finally, the continual learning. So there's a continuous improvement aspect to DevOps. That if you're not thinking about things if you're not thinking about it in a cyclical manner, you're not just trying to get to a done state with DevOps. You should be going towards a continuous improvement process. And again, he mentions culture. So to wrap to condense all those, I found something online. I like to have really simple acronyms. I'm simple like that. I like to have something that's really boiled down to just the smallest possible. So there's this definition online. If you look up what is DevOps, you're going to find this, and you'll find different variations of it. There's the CAMS model, the COMS model, and the Calmer model. They're all mean this. All the letters in the acronyms mean the same thing. So there's C for culture. So actually talking or actually having people that aren't trying to stab each other in the back constantly is pretty important for a DevOps transformation. There's automation. So you're actually automating as much as you possibly can in a DevOps transformation. Lean. So that's going back to the Six Sigma. So if you're at Lean Six Sigma, there's the same principles that drive Lean Six Sigma. You'll notice a lot of the same things happening with DevOps. There's value stream mapping and things along those lines. Measurements. This is something that I don't see emphasized a whole lot out in my readings, but actually measuring what you're doing is really important. So I was watching this thing about the CEO from Ford. So Ford, during the financial crisis, Ford was just doing awful along with GM and everybody else. And so the CEO took the reins, and they were doing at the high level. They had this dashboard, and so they're hemorrhaging money. They're having all these quality issues. Their sales were down, and they had this dashboard, and everything was green. Everything's thumbs up, boss. We're good. And it was interesting talking to him about it, because that's an example of measurements not being effective. So having effective measurements is really important when you're talking about DevOps. And with the Ford situation, there wasn't really a DevOps thing that was going on there, but it was an issue of culture, and they had to address the culture within that senior leadership team to really be able to start getting those measurements to be useful. It wasn't necessarily that the measurements were designed poorly. It was how they were being implemented, because people were trying to hide the stuff that they were doing wrong because they didn't want to lose their jobs. And finally, sharing. So sharing means that you're actually, when you figure out how to solve a problem, that you actually tell other people about it, and other people know how to get to that thing that you've solved. So if you're working in silos and everybody's just knowledge hoarding, that's not good for a DevOps transformation. All right, so that's the CAMS model, the COMS model. Kind of like this one the best, the COMS. And also sometimes it's nice that when you're thinking about what is DevOps, to think about what isn't DevOps. When we started talking about DevOps at TVA a couple years ago, there was a conception amongst many that DevOps was developers and operations people sitting in the same room together, and that if you did that, you have completed your DevOps transformation. That is not what DevOps is. There is a team dynamic that you can talk about as far as having a smaller team where you're actually self-directed and able to get all the work done that you need to. But simply putting people in the same room together is not going to get your DevOps transformation, and actually will probably be counterproductive if you start with that. So another thing that DevOps isn't, if you have a vendor come to you, say, if you buy our product, you will then have DevOps, they're lying to you. That's not true. There are tools out there that can help you accelerate your DevOps transformation possibly, but it's not something that you can just buy off the shelf. This isn't something that's simple like that. Also, as I said earlier with the third way, it's not something that you can complete. This isn't something like, we're going to have a 2-year DevOps transformation, and afterwards we will be DevOps, and that's done. You know, we'll have that checkbox just like we did with ITIL a few years ago. It's something that you're going to continually to improve and change. So DevOps, because it's such a mushy definition, is something that is continually evolving, and organizations are continually evolving around it. There's also, I took a screen grab from this DevOps guys. Another thing that DevOps isn't is a free-for-all, so that's, it's not just do whatever you want. It's not a pre-ITIL cowboy days. I really like this one. We actually ran into this one at TVA recently. We had to squelch it because there's a concept like, oh, we can finally get rid of our change process and just go straight to production now. And that's not what DevOps is. You're actually you're putting more processing controls around things to really have a lot of confidence that what you're putting in production is going to work. And you can then speed up that system as you have that confidence, and you continue to have that confidence built into it. There's also some other stuff on there if you're interested. So I don't know if any of you noticed, but when I started reading through all these, I didn't see anything about CI/CD. And when I think about DevOps personally, I think of continuous integration, continuous delivery. If you're not doing continuous integration, continuous delivery, it doesn't really seem like you're doing DevOps to me. With the whole CAM model that I was showing on there was automation, and automation is kind of what they're talking about with this here. So at TVA, we've been using the Booz Allen maturity guide, and they have 7 pillars, essentially, of what DevOps is, stuff in blue over here. And so there's what they use, version control and configuration management are basically the same thing when they talk about it in that documentation. So you really have to have version control. If you're not using version control, I'm talking to a bunch of developers. I really hope everybody here uses version control. It's pretty much foundational. It's step 0 for doing anything with it. Continuous integration, have automated builds, having your automated testing going on. And there's automated testing is a piece that you can create a CI/CD pipeline without automated testing, but you're not going to have good long-term results if you continue to not use automated testing. So there's a little bit of chicken and egg. If you've not, I would figure again, we're talking to a group of developers, I think most of you are probably familiar with using unit tests and things along those lines. You can go into a holy war of what integration test is versus a UI test versus a unit test, and I'm not going to go into that, but automated testing, actually ensuring that what you're building is actually going to work in an automated fashion is really important. And then infrastructure as code. This is one that's near and dear to me. I still work in operations, and infrastructure as code, I see this is still really it's a maturing this is a maturing area of IT. Some of these things like continuous integration, I mean that's been around for a decade, but infrastructure as code is really still maturing right now. And that's actually having your stuff. There's a term at Gartner, or there's a saying at Gartner that in DevOps everybody's a developer. So when you're an ops person, you're creating your infrastructure, but you're creating it using scripts and APIs and things along those lines. And finally, so the continuous deployment, continuous delivery, you could really combine those. It's basically getting it into production. And when you're talking about what DevOps does, I kind of, one of the ways that I explain what DevOps is to developers is that you take Agile and then you sprinkle, it's like sprinkling nitrous on it. Like you can get your stuff from your development environment into production really fast with DevOps. So it kind of there's a release gap that you run into when you are just doing Agile and you don't have a streamlined way to get things into production. And that's what DevOps buys you. So that's the continuous delivery part. And then continuous monitoring is that you're actually monitoring your stuff. So ideally you're monitoring it in all your environments, but at the very least that you're monitoring your production environment and that you're doing some sort of real-time monitoring. It's not something where you're just grabbing logs after something's broken. That you're actually like proactively monitoring your stuff. I like this definition of DevOps. It's something I can grab onto, and it's something that we were able to actually start doing some actionable items. When you're talking about these mushier, calm stuff, it's hard to really dive into those. And so these, based off of the Enterprise DevOps Playbook, which is actually free download, it's a PDF. It's about 70 pages. It's a really easy read and it's a quick read. That outlines what these different areas are, and that's really helped us kind of hone in on what action items we should take in the near term. All right, so what's my definition of DevOps? I like to think of DevOps as actually helping your IT department align towards business outcomes. So when you look at things like ITIL is all about process, but it doesn't really talk much about what are we actually doing? What business value are we getting this? How is this actually helping our bottom line? Things along those lines. So what DevOps is, it's very much about orienting your IT department towards business values and delivering things really quick and having resiliency built into the system. So it's more secure, it's higher quality, and you have it, it stays up. You have better reliability. So that's what DevOps is, and you do it by automating your delivery, by getting people to actually talk to each other. And I work in not all of you probably work in a large enterprise environment. When you're working, we have 700 people in our IT department. When you have that many people don't talk to each other. They just assume that everybody else is an idiot. And that sort of stuff is really bad from a culture standpoint, from actually getting work done standpoint. And then you're also constantly measuring your capabilities. So when you make a change to your system, when you're talking about how are we doing, that you actually have data behind it. It's not just a gut feeling that everybody has. And a way that I like to think about IT in general is that IT is a business multiplier. I use this, I got this little equation up here. You could really switch out IT with your HR department or your marketing department. This isn't something to say that IT is somehow unique in this way, but when you have, if you think of your department that you're in as a business multiplier, the better you are, the better your business outcomes are going to be. And so there's data that shows that. There's this book, Accelerate, that was written that really digs into the numbers behind DevOps. And they did a study. They assessed a bunch of publicly traded companies back in 2014 with their DevOps maturity, all right? And the ones that scored with a high DevOps maturity had market capitalizations that were 50% higher after a 3-year period. So having a mature IT department that's adopting DevOps practices impacts your bottom line as a business. So it's not just doing technology for technology's sake. When you're doing DevOps, you're actually improving your business outcomes. That's really important. And so there's my definition. All right, so I also think about DevOps more in a pragmatic standpoint. Don't shoot for things just because it sounds great. Like, so for example, if you don't do any automated testing today, don't say in 6 months we're going to be 100% unit test coverage across our entire environment. Let's go do it, guys, because that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for a variety of reasons. So it makes sense to just focus on your problem areas and make those better. So if you're not really good with your agile, like you're not actually doing stand-ups, you're not actually doing like retrospectives and things along those lines, focus on your agile hygiene. If your coding practices are pretty weak and you don't really have good merging strategies, you're working as like maybe you started out with one developer and now you have three and you're constantly stepping on each other and you don't really understand why, spend a day, actually look at your merging strategy and try to come up with something that works for you. Be pragmatic about it. Work on the stuff that makes sense. Also, I've harped on automated testing a little bit. It's important. Some of the other stuff, like having smaller, consistent, self-directed teams, that could be something that you could focus on. If you constantly are switching out resources left and right from a team, that can really discourage that cohesiveness of the team, and you'll have worse long-term outcomes if you do that. So my stance on DevOps is do what makes sense. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about what TVA is doing with our DevOps transformation now. Like I said earlier, I like to boil things down to the simplest possible thing. When I look at the Calmer and the columns and the CAMs and all that model, I really see three themes in there. You have culture, automation, and metrics. So culture, it kind of covers the sharing aspect of it. If you have a good culture, you're actually going to be talking to each other, not stabbing each other in the back. And if you figure out something, you might tell somebody about it. Automation, to me, so automation, that's the CI/CD pipeline that we were talking about just a minute ago, the DevOps delivery pipeline. Automation might also include infrastructure as code. If you automate bad process, you'll have a much faster bad process. So the lean aspect of this entire thing, to me, boils into the automation piece. As you're automating things, you should be looking at your process at the same time. And then finally, metrics. If you're not measuring yourself, you're probably going to lose funding eventually. If you're not able to actually prove that you're actually helping things in a quantitative fashion, you're gonna eventually be looking for a job. So, what is TVA doing specifically? So we are doing we do these little lunch and learns now. So we do a lunch and learn about once a month, and we have these DevSecOps Community of Practice Presents events, and we actually do them here at the EDNI, and we have people that are doing things. People that are doing things successfully, they're doing things in a forward-thinking manner at TVA, and they present about how they're doing that within TVA. So that gives people within our organization some hope. Like if somebody within the same constraints that I'm working in can get this to work, that means that I can get it to work. So that helps from a cultural standpoint. We put up posters with our process diagram. We make pins. It sounds cheesy, but marketing is actually really important when you're talking about DevOps. And how you market it really varies from who you're marketing it to. So executives don't care about the tech speak generally. Operations people don't care about the same thing that developers care about, and security people don't care about the same thing that those other two groups care about. So when you're marketing DevOps, if you're trying to convince somebody within your organization that DevOps is important, you really need to be honing in your message. When we started this transformation about a year and a half ago, we tried to have a one-size-fits-all messaging platform, and that one-size-fits-all messaging platform really didn't do good for anybody because nobody actually really attached to it. So if you're talking to executives, it's an accelerated delivery mechanism. This is going to help us get things to the business faster, and it's going to be better. If you're talking to developers, it's more around the coding aspect of it, the CI/CD pipeline. You don't have to involve as many people to be able to get things into production, things along those lines. So it really varies. Operations people, the best selling point is the consistency. So you have a much more consistent environment throughout the entire environment. So you don't have all these special snowflakes everywhere. Everything's more standardized, and operations people just love that. All right. Something that we're also talking about TVA, this is still just in planning. This is in the ideation phase or imagineering it, whatever you want to call it. We're looking at the dojo model. The dojo model, if you're not familiar with it, which probably most of you aren't, the dojo model was spearheaded by Target about 5 years ago. And what it is it's an immersive learning experience. So you take a group, an agile team, take like 6 or 7 people from your delivery team, and you physically locate them. That was really loud. Physically locate them in a different area, and you teach them how to do things a new way. So you teach them proper agile practices. You might have agile coaches there. You teach them how to do CI/CD pipelines and automated testing. You teach them how to use newer cloud resources. Whatever it is that you need, that your organization is pivoting towards, you are teaching these people, you're teaching your delivery teams how to actually do these things. And that entire process is usually about 6 weeks long, is the way that Target does it. And when people are going back to their desks, then they've now had experience, hands-on experience doing it. My personal experience with training is that normally it's a week. You go there and you might learn like 1 or 2 useful pieces of information, but generally you're not going to really change your behaviors that much with training. This is a methodology that helps change behaviors in the long term, and it's something that can be continuously improved. So the dojo itself acts as a place where where new things are being learned, and then those new things are being proliferated out to your organization. So when you're dealing with at TVA, we have 700 IT employees that trying to get that messaging across to everybody effectively. Something like a dojo model makes a lot of sense. So this is something that we're looking at from a cultural standpoint. All right, so our automated, going into the A of the CAM model that I introduced a minute ago. So this is our DevSecOps pipeline. You'll notice that it's a cycle, kind of like Agile. You have your user stories, and so it doesn't really make sense to build something unless somebody actually wants it. So if somebody asks for something, you code it, you create your unit tests when you create your code. Sometimes you might be even doing test-driven development. I don't know if do we have any test-driven development fans in here? Yeah. All right, okay, all right. That's about a quarter of the room. All right, so you might be doing test-driven development, so you know what I'm talking about. You have your builds, assuming that it's working, and then you also have your automated test kicked off when you're doing your builds. So you also are doing your security scans when you're doing that too. Static code analysis at the very least. And then you automatically are getting things into dev. And we leave it at the developers whether or not they want that to happen every time that they do a commit, or if they want to choose when that deployment happens. Sometimes it varies from team to team what they want to do. So this side over here, at TVA, developers have generally had the power to do most of this themselves. We haven't had the security scans be readily available like that, but it was getting to dev was pretty easy. So you don't need to create any tickets for it. You usually have your own rights to be able to get things that are dev. It's always been this side that's been the thing that's created all kinds of friction inside of our machine. So what we've done is we've actually created a system where the acceptance deployment, we use the ITIL change management process. We use a specific tool, ITSM. So the actual change management aspect of this is being handled automatically by the release. So the release is opening the change, doing the work, closing the change. So we're actually got all of our governance tick boxes happening. At TVA, we have to follow a lot of controls. So we're SOX, we're NERC SIP, we're FISMA. So being a federal entity and a power provider makes it so that you have a whole lot of different eyes looking at you from a regulatory compliance standpoint, so we can't ignore it. So this is something where we can adhere to our regulatory compliance and go fast, which usually you have to choose one or the other. So it goes into acceptance. We have a business user approve it. And then at that point, again, the deployment into production, we have a path that allows for our developers, if they have good hygiene in this area, they have a more straightforward path to get things into production in an automated fashion. So this entire system together You can see it's in a circle, so it's an engine, and you can run the engine faster and faster. So what we're experiencing, so just to give you an idea, at TVA, to get something into production in less than 2 days is nearly impossible, all right? And then generally what you're looking at is more like a week to 2 week period. Like once you decide that you want to put something into production, you're looking at a week or 2 weeks to get something in there just because of all the check boxes and things, all the hoops that you jump through. So what this engine allows you to do is there's minutes and hours that you can get things into production. So you're going from days or weeks to minutes or hours to be able to get things into production. So this is something that really, there's a lot of tangible benefits there, and what we're seeing is our business partners are exuberant that this is happening. So it's something that we're showing the value today. We only have a small set. We have about 5 applications that are going to production right now, but the plan is to continue to grow that in years out. All right, another aspect of automation is infrastructure as code. So I got a little a screenshot demo up here. I really like the idea behind API-driven infrastructure and self-service infrastructure. So if you want something, you can either go to a web page and fill out a form and get it yourself, or there's an API that you can just call. If you've worked with cloud services like AWS or Azure, this might just be second nature to you. But having that API-driven infrastructure and all that regulatory compliance stuff taken care of at the same time, that's not something that AWS does for us. So what this is actually doing, in about 2 minutes, you can send a REST API, you can send a REST call, and you'll have a running application then at that point. And that on the back end, it's also taking care of all of our regulatory stuff. It's taking care of all of our ticketing. It's taking care of all of that. So this will allow us to move a lot faster long term. This is something that we're still maturing in. I said at the beginning, infrastructure as code is still a relatively new idea. If you've worked with Terraforms or anything like that, they're still maturing. I mean, these are areas that are still maturing. Containers, they've worked great in the Linux space for a long time. We're a pretty heavy Microsoft shop, and Microsoft's still playing catch up right now. So there's lots of things within infrastructure as code over the next couple of years that are going to really mature and get pretty exciting. So that's another thing we're doing. All right, so finally, in the automation section, we have security. So with security, this isn't just a TVA thing. This is a industry thing. Whenever you're talking about a large organization with a security shop, it's a heavy touch feature to be able. It's a heavy touch thing to get security scans done. So there's a lot of coordination. You got to work with a lot of different people, and so generally there's a high transaction cost to actually doing security scans. And so what ends up happening is that those security scans happen less frequently and near the end of development. What that means is that near the end of development, when you're about to give this to your customer, you have a security scan run, and most likely those security scans are going to find problems. So then you, as a business, have to decide: do we delay our release of this, or do we accept the risk? So neither of those options are good. So what this security scan does is it actually allows you, every time that you're doing a build, you're doing a static code analysis. Every time that you're putting things into acceptance, you're doing a dynamic scan. So you're getting that feedback almost instantly as a developer. So if I had 5 vulnerabilities yesterday and I make a code change and I had 10 vulnerabilities today, I can know that that code change that I just made was the reason that happened, and I'll have it fresh in my mind instead of finding out about it a year and a half later after whoever wrote it left. So this is something where it's not only are you making your system more secure, it's actually less work too. So, I mean, it's hard not to sell this because everybody wins in this situation. The developers win, the operations people win, the business wins, everybody wins. So automated security. All right, and so finally at TVA, we've built a custom app that we call DevOps System Enablement. What this does is it actually goes out and takes all of our assets. We have a whole list of assets, whole bunch of different software assets. We take all those out of our asset manager, and then we compare that list to all our source code repository and say, what's your DevOps score? So we grade it on whether it has a automated build, does it have automated delivery, is it using automated testing, and what is its code coverage? If it is doing automated testing, is it using our automated change process? And it actually goes out there and it scores it. And I was telling Andrew at the beginning of this, Cat's still near the top, buddy. Yeah, he was. He helped us in the early days of this. So we actually have a way for our developers to actually see how they're doing with their DevOps adoption. So this is actually something we're planning on releasing tomorrow. So this is still fresh, that we're working on this, and the idea is to make this just available to everybody. So anybody within IT has rights to be able to look at this. This isn't something that only the executives are looking at and and working down. So this is something that is just freely available. Anybody can go in here and look at this. This is to help us improve this score as we move forward. Give you that quantifiable look into things. This is a quick little side note. This really shows your DevOps maturity, but this does not map to business outcomes right now. So there's a gap right now with our measuring, and we're looking at that. What is it? So we're looking at things like what's the best way to measure like cycle time, for example. Cycle time is how long it goes from we've decided to put things into production to going to production. So this is our 1.0 product, and the idea is to continue to invest in this and to improve it as we go forward. All right, shameless plug time. All right, I'm the organizer for CHA DevOps. If you're interested in knowing more about DevOps, we have a meetup every third Tuesday at 6 p.m. You can find us very easily. You're at CHA Dev right now. Just put ops at the end. That's us, all right? So come check us out. Sometimes we have salsaritas too, so it's pretty tasty. I'm just telling you, it's good. So there's that. And announcing today, so we're actually going to be hosting a DevOps Days in Chattanooga. This will be Chattanooga's very first DevOps Days. It's going to be November 13th. John Willis, co-author of the DevOps Handbook, is going to be coming and headlining it. We have several different organizers from different areas. It's going to be over at the Chattanooga Theater Center. CHA Tech is helping us organize this thing. So this is something we have TVA and Unum and Blue Cross Blue Shield helping us with all of this. So this is something that we're happy to announce. The international organization, if you go to devopsdays.org, they're all over the world, and I think that we're probably the smallest city to actually host one of these. So this is pretty cool. It's a testament to Chattanooga's, our tech savvy. So if you haven't, go ahead and put in your calendar, November 13th. We'd love to have you. You'll see more about that. We're going to continue to market it, but happy to announce that today. And now I'm ready for questions if anybody has any. Sure. The UAT process, it varies. So generally our expectation is for the business to go through a test plan. And it's really up to the business to decide how detailed they want to go into that. So that's user acceptance testing is the business owner either delegating or doing it themselves, going through whatever that change was and testing it.
The UAT or manual QA process is often a place where this, cycle can break down and become a roadblock.
Yeah.
So I was interested if you guys have thought about that or any patterns for TVA to automate that.
So it's interesting. So I've worked at TVA for several years, and I went to the DevOps Enterprise Summit a couple years ago, and all these organizations were talking about their QA departments and blah 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 QA departments, and I'm like, what's a QA department? So we actually have it rolled in. Basically, we expect our developers to do that QA function generally. So when you look at DevOps literature and a lot, what you actually generally have is your QA and your developer working in the same team. So that's part of it. The UAT part of it, so me and my operation, my operations mind, when I heard of automated testing, I instantly thought of a little robot going in there and clicking all the screens for people. So there's a tool for that. It's called Selenium. But I would say that having that QA function within the team itself and using a tool like Selenium to do that front-end user testing will take care of 95% of what your issue is with that, and then you might still want to have a human being go in there and touch it, and that's okay. Like it's really, it varies from, your business need is what's going to drive what you do with that, generally. More questions? What do you got? Got to wait for the mic to come over. I like making Brett run.
Hey, boss. So my question is more practical.
Okay.
I'm dealing with GitLab CI, and this might be more of a architectural question.
More of a what?
Architecture.
Okay.
So I've noticed that in configuration development for the CI/CD, that process is bottlenecked because in order for me to see how it's actually going with doing the build and running the tests, all automated on the server behind a firewall with access to production, so it can pull down production's database and just kind of do a good solid build. It's every git commit.
Is what?
Every git commit.
Okay.
There's no way to kind of have a sidestepped development process for the configuration that I've seen without having to make commits to Git, the Git repo. Or am I missing something?
I'm not super familiar with GitLab. We've toyed with it a little bit with our CI. I've heard good things about its CI methodology. With our methodology, we use TFS. So actually using production data, so you're actually pulling down production data to do your tests, to do your builds? Is that
That's
what
the plan, yeah.
Okay.
Is that...
Generally, you'd want to have, like, so in DevOps, in DevOps thinking, you do build one time. So you have your build created, and then you'd have it transformed for each of your environments. If you're using like a QA environment or a staging environment. But I mean, the way that we have it, I mean, are you talking about like the NPM packages and things along those that you're pulling down? I guess that maybe we should talk afterwards. I'm not quite following what it is that you're, why you're needing to pull production data down to be able to complete your build.
Okay, yeah, I think talking afterward might be a good idea.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. That's pretty much
Time that we have.
Yeah, that's it. We've got to let people go. You'll be around for a few minutes after that,
Yeah,
right?
I can hang out.
Round of applause for Alex, everybody. Appreciate it, Alex.
Thanks.